Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Let's Talk Now. I hope you all had a good time watching the fights over the weekend and you enjoyed my inaugural episode of this type of video last week. First order of business, I just want to address some channel stuff. I made a Twitter account where I've been tweeting to no one but my personal Twitter account, so go follow that, link in the bio. And with that out of the way, if you are watching this and you're not subscribed, please go ahead and do that. I personally promise you're not going to regret it. Now, let's talk about the fights then. The Javid Basharat fight, it kind of started out slow, but it picked up the pace at around the halfway point of the first round. But from then, it was one-way traffic as Javid imposed his grappling game in the second round, hammered in front kicks to the body, and eventually took one up top and kind of stumbled Tony. But in the third round, he really styled on Tony on the feet. He realized that he had a vast height and reach advantage and decided to actually put it to use. He would stick Gravely with a jab and slip or pull out of the way of the return, which helped to pull on Tony's gas tank that much more, even though he was seemingly already gassed from all those takedown attempts earlier in the fight. I really liked the way that Javid seemed to be a good striker on, all three levels, to borrow a term from basketball. Obviously he was lancing Tony up at distance, but I really liked what he was doing in the clinch there. He would be hand fighting and then folding elbows over the top, kind of like how Tony Ferguson used to do when he still had that dog in him. One area of consistent defensive weakness, though, that I noticed was when he was in the pocket and exchanging. He seemed to be getting hit a lot easier. Another kind of, I don't know if this would be a big thing going forward, but another small area for concern was when Gravely would throw a head kick. Javid would try to roll it with his hands down by his waist, which is something that could get him Usman'd if he fights a taller opponent like that. And, we actually saw that happen later on in the night when Bill Algeo got kicked in the back of the head pretty much by Andre Fili. But man, the bantamweight division just got a lot deeper. Javid's first impression in the UFC was really, really good. Let's see, the next fight was Mariya Agapova versus Gillian Robertson, and what a tale of two different rounds. Agapova looked really, really good in the first round. She was stuffing takedowns and dealing damage, using those Travis Brown elbows just whenever Gillian would have her up against the cage trying to take her down. But she was just piecing Gillian Robertson up in the first round. But then the second round started, she got taken down, and from there it was just the beginning of the end. Very scary choke. It looked like, because the choke when it was originally over her chin, and I guess either Agapova spit her mouthpiece out to, I don't know, make more breathing room or try and get the ref to intervene. But when that mouthpiece fell out, it looked like she was biting through her tongue. Oh man, that was brutal. It was brutal. And then after Gillian released the choke after the ref stopped it, Agapova was unconscious on the ground, seizing up. It was very uncomfortable to watch, but oh well. At least the Kazakh contingent of the UFC fan base still have Damir Smugulov and Shavkat Rakhmonov to look forward to. Next fight on the card was Ogden versus Zellhubber, and Zellhubber was making his debut, and not a good debut. This fight was kind of lackluster compared to what the previous fights of the night offered up, but Ogden looked relatively decent, just throwing out single strikes and landing on Zellhubber, getting him to commit and just peeking out the side door and running away. He had pretty good grappling. It just looked like Zellhubber was going through octagon jitters in the first half of the fight, and then when he woke up and tried to close the distance and actually deal out some damage, he had some atrocious cagecraft in the second half. He was unable to corner Ogden against the cage to trap him and really do anything resembling any meaningful damage. And just throughout the fight, you had Zellhubber closing distance, trapping Ogden against the cage, swinging wide, and then Ogden would just dip out the side door and, you know, run a little track meet to get out of there. But decent performance from Trey Ogden, I guess. Now, this next fight, I was actually very excited to see this fight after seeing what Loma Lookboonmee was able to do in her previous fights in the UFC, and after seeing Gomez's Contender Series fight a few weeks ago, I was very excited to see what this fight would look like in the stand-up. Good leg kicks from both. You know, one would throw a kick and the other would return. Great exchanges in the pocket whenever they did happen. Loma had a great moment where she teeped Gomez as she was on one foot and she just fell over. That was a little bit of gamesmanship there. Loma kept doing, at the beginning of the fight, when Gomez would like close distance on her and just pressure her up to the cage, she would like, if you've ever seen a switch kick, she would do the switch to make Gomez think that a kick was coming. Gomez would back up and Loma would just walk forward to try and regain some of that real estate, which I thought was funny. I don't think she faked that switch kick a lot, but I don't think she ever actually threw it. In typical WMMA fashion, though, Gomez tried for a takedown attempt and fell over, essentially giving Loma top control. And for a fight with a lot of hype around the striking skills of both fighters, it was hilarious how much of it was contested on the ground. We saw some very sloppy grappling exchanges, both fighters losing positions through some rookie-ish mistakes. I almost wish that Keith Peterson had partaken in some extra alcohol and cigarettes and just stood them up at some moments. The almost constant head and arm throw made its cameo in the women's MMA fight. The brief moments of clinch striking were amazing. I wish we had a lot more of those moments, but neither girl was really content with just keeping it standing. They really seemed to want to force the grappling for whatever reason. In the third round, Gomez had a figure four around Loma Lookboonmee, and Loma didn't know what to do. She just kept turning into the wrong direction, because if someone has a figure four, I just hit my mic. If someone has a figure four lock around your body, you want to roll to the side, if they don't have a choke in, and you're just trying to deal with that in your hand fighting, whatever, you want to roll to the side where her feet would be on the mat. It would give you some extra space to try and turn or break that figure four, but Loma kept turning into the side where Gomez's feet would be in the air. So it was just funny watching them grapple like that. It was a little bit infuriating. I really wanted to see that fight play out in the stand-up. And the only reason that she escaped that back mount position was because Gomez went for a misguided armbar attempt from back mount. And Loma ended up getting the nod, but it was a very competitive fight. I'm very excited to see Gomez match up with the other fighters in that division. Let's see. The next fight up was another very boring affair. The first round was just an absolute snooze fest. I think they combined for maybe 5 strikes landed. Is it Orion Cosce or Louis Cosce? Because I think there's 2 of them. They're brothers. Let me see. Louis Cosce. Yeah. So Louis Cosce, he did nothing but walk. He crossed his feet a lot in that first round, and when he was moving laterally. And when I saw that, I was all but practically yelling at my TV for Giles to throw leg kicks while Cosce was moving like that, just because it would be easier. It would be easier for his kick to sweep Cosce due to how out of position he would allow himself to be with his footwork. And what a snooze fest of a fight. The entirety of the first round was so boring. I was expecting the ACA president to appear out of nowhere and just stop the fight, disqualify both fighters. But the second round had slightly more activity, and the third round was just pure domination by Cosce in the grappling, which was just, like the commentary pointed out, it was infuriating because he could have just taken Giles down at any point in the fight prior to that. But very forgettable fight. I doubted they garnered any goodwill with Dana White or the fans. Damon Jackson had a good, very good fight. Very brief, very dominant though. He was just a straight savage. He really lived up to his nickname, Action, on Saturday. The poor guy's brother died in the past week, but he soldiered on and just, yeah, he put a beating on Pat Sabatini. He landed a nasty front kick. And he just proceeded to beat him like he owed him money. Obviously a bittersweet night for him, but I wish him the best in his grieving process. You know, it's always hard to see people do that. I remember, I think it was Cody Stamann, he did the same thing. His brother died a few days prior to his fight, and he went on to win. And tough. Very depressing card. Because Damon Jackson's brother died. I think Fili said he lost a baby or something like that. And obviously the passing of Elias Theodorou, there was some attention around that. The next fight was Hernandez versus Barriault. Hernandez had an amazing performance. His striking looked decent and his wrestling looked great. He was able to take Barriault down pretty consistently, and he mixed his grappling and his striking up kind of crudely. But ultimately, he got the job done. He was on Barriault like white on rice. He just looked very good and complete, but obviously there's a difference between doing that to people like Marc Andre Barriault and the rank competition at 185. But regardless, just wearing on a guy whose nickname is the Power Bar, I think, that's very impressive. The next fight was Tanner Boser versus Nascimento. And I'm not going to spend any time on this fight. All that I will say is that Boser needs to go to light heavyweight, because there was a 40-pound difference between the two, and it very obviously showed on the ground. I think Boser was like 220 something, and he's not fat, but he's not particularly lean. So I think he could maybe get himself down to 215 if he cuts into a little bit of muscle too, and then just water cuts the 10 pounds. I think he'd do really well. He'd do really well at light heavyweight. Okay, next fight on the card was Joe Pyfer versus Amedovski. The UFC seems to know something or see something about Joe Pyfer that the rest of us just don't, because they push this man hard in the promos. I don't think I saw any promotional material about Amedovski, but I saw like 4 pieces about Joe Pyfer. The fight up until the knockout wasn't, I mean, we didn't really learn anything new about Joe Pyfer. Just standard fare until Joe Pyfer he sent Amedovski to the shadow dimension. After he knocked him down initially, like, it looked like Amedovski was just an Alzheimer's stricken man that did not know where he was. He didn't know what was going on. Just the fear of God was in his eyes. But I guess they see some potential with Joe Pyfer's backstory. He offered up a little bit of that, a glimpse into that during the post-fight interview. And who doesn't love a feel-good story, right? So can't wait to see idiots on Twitter making edits of Izzy being scared of Joe Pyfer, though. That's going to be good. This was just a banger of a fight. A lot of unorthodox a lot of unorthodox things here and there from both fighters, but the unorthodox movement and style of Algeo really cost him in some big moments in this fight, since he was fighting someone that was around his height, so he wouldn't be able to just use his height and reach to get away with some defensive lapses like he tends to have. But both guys pretty tall for the featherweight division. They just kept trading head kicks with each other, but Algeo got the worst of it because of how low he keeps his hands and how he tries to roll kicks over his shoulder and cut corners and stuff like that. So he got caught really, really badly. I think it was in the first round. The third round was madness, though. Fili had a great double leg takedown and had quite a few submission attempts, which were incredibly close. Algeo, though, was from these obviously you never want to see a fighter in a disadvantaged position throw back instead of working on trying to improve their situation. But I mean, Algeo's punches were scoring in some of those moments where he had his back taken and all that stuff. The x-rays came back, and Bill Algeo indeed does have that dog in him, as overused as that joke is. Exciting to see. I mean, this felt like a setup for Bill Algeo to just beat Andre Fili and then go on to ranked competition after that. So I don't know. This was a very weird outcome in terms of, like, I don't know what the matchmakers want to do with both of those fighters after this. Maybe the battle of the Bills with Billy Q versus Bill Algeo, depending on how that fight with Hernandez goes. The main event was very, very interesting. It was interesting in that Cory really used his grappling a lot more than I think anybody would have anticipated, but it's good because it shows that he's still improving at the age of 30, I believe. The fact that Cory shot 2 takedowns in the first round really had Song biting on the takedown fake hard. Anytime Cory would level change, Song would just spaz out, getting ready to sprawl, which was very funny to see. But if Cory didn't, or if Song didn't have the speed advantage on Cory, I believe Cory would have been able to land a knee or an uppercut up the middle, which would have presumably had some very, very disastrous consequences for Song. You know, the constants of Cory having that very active lead hand, switching stances, skirting around on the outside were all present. But one thing that wasn't really all that visible in this fight, which was surprising to me, was the lack of body shots from Cory. He tends to throw a lot more of those lead hooks to the body, but I think I only really saw him throw those like 4 or 5 times, which was very uncharacteristic, especially against somebody like Song, who's a very hard hitter. You'd expect him to try and pull on that gas tank a little bit more. But the first 2 rounds were optically bad for Cory, just because Song just kept pressuring forward and pushing through whatever Cory had to offer him. And the fact that Cory doesn't have any power in his hands is really a disadvantage, because it's hard for him to gain respect to stop people from pressuring him the way that Song was able to in the first round and a half of the fight. But once Cory started landing those elbows, though, and once that one cut opened, you saw that Song was a little bit more content to just not recklessly close the distance like he was in the first round. And Cory was able to start keeping him at a distance and even pressure forward at times and really get that lead hand going and build stuff off of it. But man, that cut was nasty. I thought it was going to be stopped after the 3rd round, or before the 3rd round. I thought it was going to be stopped before the 4th round. Crazy cuts today. I mean, RoboCop had that very crazy cut, but I don't know. Song's crazy ass was laughing on bottom at the end of the 4th round after Cory tried to pull at that cut with his fingers and rub his head. And, very low IQ moment from Song, though. I feel like if he didn't shoot that takedown, maybe that cut wouldn't have progressed to the state that the doctor would stop the fight, because after that takedown happened, there was a lot of friction on Song's face after that, you know, with all those grappling exchanges. But overall, a very, very good fight to watch. Really showed the depth of the bantamweight division, that somebody that was ranked number 10 was able to put up such a good fight against someone coming off of a title fight. And the fact that Song Yadong is only 24 is just insane. I mean, think about how good he's going to be when he hits his physical prime, his athletic, like, he's going to be insane. To put up that much of a fight against Cory Sandhagen, one of the top guys in the division, in his first fight that lasted more than 3 rounds, it was very impressive to watch. And the future of the sport looks great, man. But yeah, very unfortunate that the fight stopped in the 5th round. It would have been great for Song to get that experience, and but in the end, though, I guess it's good for Song Yadong's future in terms of how we view him as fans, in terms of how he views himself, because it was a very close fight. We got robbed of that 5th round because of the cut, and it's not like Cory was schooling him or knocked him out or subbed him brutally or anything. It was a very close fight that just ended on a circumstance. So very excited to see what happens next. I think they should make that Cory versus Marlon Vera fight. And Song should fight the loser of Petr Yan or Sean O'Malley. I think that would be a very interesting fight, and I don't think Song should be penalized in that he should fight down the rankings, or, you know, I think he deserves to fight somebody in that top 6, top 7 area. There were a lot of leftovers from the week that I wasn't really able to discuss last week, but I believe we all heard about Elias Theodorou's passing. Very unfortunate for a healthy young man to die of cancer like that. And respect to him, because he suffered through the disease quietly. Kind of like Chadwick Boseman's death. His passing was a horrifying shock and just a dreadful reminder that life is short. It was good to see that the UFC had a little moment of silence for him, especially after he was cut for no reason. I mean, losing to Derek Brunson after amassing a 3 or 4 fight win streak I think he had, after losing to Thiago Santos, like, those aren't bad losses, and I think his somewhat boring style didn't play him any favors. But the guy seemed like a cool guy from all of his media and stuff. You know, he was a ring card boy for Invicta FC. You know, 'cause yeah, I mean, he was a handsome man with that long hair, so it made sense. But he always seemed to be a guy that didn't take life too seriously, which in a sport filled with macho men and with how dangerous the sport is in general, it was a very stark contrast to see a personality like that. Jose Aldo announced his retirement this week. The King of Rio, forever in our hearts and forever disrespected. I don't know why the fans disrespect him so much, because everybody seems to love him, but he should arguably be higher in the GOAT debate than Anderson Silva and Demetrius Johnson, because I believe his level of competition at featherweight was a lot higher than Silva's at middleweight and Demetrius's at flyweight, along with Jose, who, however undeservedly, fighting for a title at a different weight class, which separates himself from Anderson Silva, and the fact that Jose Aldo didn't pop for steroids. You know, you can speculate all you want, but he didn't, and Silva did. That fact gets overlooked a lot. In a fair world, I believe that Jose Aldo should be number 3 on the GOAT list, only below John Jones and GSP. And I hope he has an actual retirement and not, you know, all the botched MMA retirements that we seem to have, where these legends, they retire for a few years and then they come back all fat and out of shape just to lose to, you know, the next big thing. So I hope he makes more than enough money in that burger chain that he opened in Brazil and doesn't feel the need to fight again. Alright, and this wraps up this week's episode of Let's Talk Now. This is my 2nd episode, and if you've noticed, a lot longer. So I hope you're still watching, and if you still are, thank you very much, because most people don't watch past 2 minutes of my videos, and I assume that the analytics for this one are going to be terrible. So I won't be making any technique videos on any of the fight nights coming up, but I will have these Let's Talk Now mini podcasts, I guess you can call them, hopefully being published every Monday. I have been trying to expand into other platforms, so I made a Twitter where I just tweet to myself, and I have a TikTok where, you know, somebody's making edits for me just to gain some views on that. So if you want, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, like the video, comment down below, whatever, and I'll see you next week.